Bridged Saturngrad universe. In the beginning, and understand this is the moments before this time, is what we consider to be the real time. Frater H and his friends are really real people. Um, Although Frater's friends are all named after famous people, they're named after famous people, but understand, like, for example, someone could be called John Smith and be fairly famous, but there could be another John Smith who's just a plumber. It's The reality is lots of people share the same names. I mean, it's a very rare feat to have a very truly unique name, you know. But with Mr. Peck and Peter Graves, all these, yes, the pictures do look like the real people, but it's meant to be that the actual reality, they're meant to be, they're not the people that they claim to be, that they're actually different. You know, we're just this is just comedy. It's a parody. We're trying to stretch this out. But the real time is these are real people. And they don't go through science fiction nonsense. They don't go for all this. They go for real dramas. They run a show. They run a show like they may run a show from a Pontiac. They don't run it from a Star Destroyer. They don't run it from a magic kingdom on top of a mountain. For example, Mr. Peck and Mr. Graves were running a show out of a Pontiac, and then they downgraded. They lost their funding, and they downgraded, and they were running a show out of a shed, which had their shed stolen by flat Earth Maoists. And thus, finally, the end game was they were running a show in a hole in the ground. And it's a lot like the commentary of real life. That real life, a person can just lose it all and just lose it all and lose it all and lose it all and keep going deeper and deeper until you're in a hole in the ground. Okay. So so then the real world is officially over, but the reality is that Saturn Growth Productions was owned by a man who had an avatar named Mr. Pennypacker. That is who is over there at the other site, is a man named Mr. Pennypacker. That is actually the avatar of the real life person who runs Saturn Growth Productions, which over here at Metrotrica is a hated man and is pretty much wanted and is not liked, but it is important to tell the story of the Frater versus Retro. The Frater versus Retro, as you see it today, is based in a fantasy world. It is known as the Saturngrad universe. The Saturngrad universe, just like the Marvel comic universe or the DC universe, is not real. It is a simulation. It is like in the case of that, it is comic books and movies. In the case of the Saturngrad universe, it is a computer simulation. Mr. Pennypacker at the time had a quantum computer. What really the first of quantum computers. Maybe by the time this episode comes out, maybe there will be a truly functional quantum computer. But nonetheless, he made a quantum computer. He made a computer that he created a simulation, a military simulation for a character he had called Dark Milo. Dark Milo, uh, at the time, it was a very powerful enemy AI. The point is to create a military computer simulation between something that is a parody of the Empire, like in Star Wars. But then, what happened was, apparently, because Mr. Pennypacker was a fan of the Frater versus Retro. Well, of course, would know whoever was involved with the actual actors who were Frater's H and all those. And so he obviously created AI versions of those characters. He made an AI version of Pooh Guppy Adams. He made an AI version of Frater's H, and he made an AI version of Mr. Graves and Mr. Peck, and ultimately in the end, anything else, And but he never planned for those characters to actually be put into anything. They were saved in the code. But what it was is Dark Milo at the time, and he's in this like computer simulation world. This is the Saturn Ground universe. It made by this quantum computer under Mr. Pennypacker. He 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 believes very strongly. This is, see, understand, if you were created suddenly, not the way like God did. God creates you in such a way so you understand your origins, you understand who you are, where you came from, who your parents are. Imagine if all of a sudden you just came out of thin air, 30 years old, out of thin air, no parents, no nothing, just all of a sudden you're just in a state of being. And in his case, he's a kind of a space you know what, YouTube doesn't like that word, a space NAZI, YouTube doesn't like that. Maybe we could talk to Mr. Doc Maddie, see if we could talk to him. See, talk to Algo, and who's the Susan's content ID bot, and see if Algo would kind of cool down if we could just say that one word once. Maybe not. Okay, we'll keep it like that. So basically, what it is his whole role and goal is to run a military. He has his own military, a space military, and they are to try to conquer the known galaxy. And and there's like Earth. There's armies there, and they're trying to kind of try to keep Dark Milo back. And but Milo still believes he's starting to develop this idea that actually he starts to develop his own origin, even though it's not true. He believes, and it's because he was looking on YouTube and he found this channel, this Sattergraph Productions. It was obviously very easy to find because he's become such a powerful AI. He's starting to kind of not even realize he's actually tapping into the inner workings of the quantum computer and not even know he's doing so. He's really, it's because it's like he doesn't know, but he knows. It's so he has become to the belief, that somehow he is from Frater SH's past, and that somehow Frater SH had promised him the Frater versus Retro show, and as a result, that he feels Frater owes him, that he was one of Frater's dojo, one of his students. That the idea was Frater didn't like Pooh and Mr. Peck and Graves because they really didn't ever talk about video games back then, and they didn't. We got a clip here, in this special that shows you that really these guys really didn't talk about video games. They just were goofy and they were hilarious, but they didn't talk about video games. It kind of got under Frater's skin eventually. This is not like now where So basically, what happens is, um, he comes very strongly that somehow he needs revenge against somebody he's actually never met. He's never met Frater SH. He's never met Mr. Peck. He's never met Mr. Graves. He's never met Pooh Guppy Adams. He's never grew up and cracked in Ohio. He's never been any of these things. He's just literally a figment of your imagination. But He's a computer simulation. He's not real. He's not real, guys. So he 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 believes in this stuff after a while so strongly that he's essentially put himself under such a strong delusion that he he feels like he needs some kind of revenge. Well, as a result of all this, is essentially he creates a debug program that at first he thinks he's come to the theory that he needs to somehow go to another dimension. That if he could have access to other dimensions, he could be anywhere. In case the enemy armies, which are real, there. I told you that in the beginning of um, uh, this abridgment, that this is about. This was originally a military simulator. It's like a video game from the PC in the 1990s. Okay, so so basically, um, so what is going to happen is yeah, got all these things in my head going here. Um, is that Milo creates a debug program, but he doesn't see it as a debug program. He sees it as like a dimensional merge machine or a quantum using like sci-fi language, some kind of trans-dimensional quantum merging machine or really sounds really fantastic stuff. So, but it's a debug program and it actually taps into the quantum computer. Imagine a computer. Imagine a, a character you made in a video game, and all of a sudden it's able to start sentient. The AI became sentient enough to start controlling your computer. Wouldn't that be scary? That would be pretty scary. Well, that's Milo. Milo has essentially Dark Milo has essentially become that AI, and as a result, but he has but his program is flawed. It's not a machine. It's not like a laptop or something. It's literally a redneck named Billy. So here we go. Lily, the character you're going to meet later, not in this program, but later on in Mentor Trekkica, one of the cast members is Billy. That is actually a debug program, which we'll explain at the end what happens to him. So, so basically, the debug program by itself is really stupid until it connects more and more with the quantum computer, and then it taps into the quantum computer's memory. Meaning, it could either have the IQ of 10 or it could have the IQ of 200. It could be amazingly smart or amazingly stupid. So he has Billy, which is the transgender, I mean, trans anything, dimensional um, machine to create the big four, which is Frater H, Mr. Graves, Mr. Peck, and Pugapi Adams. He believes, and this is what he believes, and this is what's in the original show, that these guys were that he believes very strongly that the reason why they're saved away in some code is he did that. He believes very strongly. These are all delusions that the AI had created because Mr. Painpacker made him to be a nutty dictator in space for Earth forces to fight. So the result of him being nuts like this, he's he believes very strongly now that at some point when what this is what happened. These are the continuity that's in his head. This is not the truth. And at one point in time, of course, in the Frater versus Retro movie and Final Frater, All these are the growing pains to break out of this continuity that's Dark Milo has created, because the guys are literally have fallen for this for so long. This is what it is, that basically Dark Milo believes that he was an apprentice. He was trained in a dojo by Frater to be the new host of the Frater versus Retro show, with at least three other students of the dojo. So they'd be the new big four, or the new big five, or whatever, six, or whatever. He got jealous. He got jealous and felt that he should be the leader. And originally, Frater, he he believes that Frater wanted that actually that the other three or four, or actually the new people coming in, that no one was going to be the leader. They were all going to be equal. Um, Milo doesn't like this, and he kills them all. I do a certain Disney Star Wars movie, but he kills them all because he gets jealous. He gets jealous, because he's evil. He's crazy. So then, in this reality that's in his head, that he believes in this continuity in his head, that Frater finally, he brings Frater on his ship. He has Sergeant and all those classic characters, and he confronts Frater and say, "Well, this is how it's going to be, and then you're still going to be producer, but I'm going to be the host, and I kill all these guys." Of course, Frater thinks he's insane. They have a lightsaber battle, and of course, Frater destroys him, royally destroys him, but doesn't kill him. Why is this? Because the fight actually didn't happen. And you're like, wait, what? Yeah, the fight actually didn't happen because Frater and his friends didn't exist, because they were just a code Mr. Pennypacker had made by playing around. He never meant for them to be in this military simulation. You know, but this idiot had made this idea. In the beginnings of Frater versus Retro, the movie, it mostly, the deal with that movie is it deals with this sort of what I call the false continuity, which is the new Frater versus Retro continuity, which is Dark Milo essentially uh, overwhelms that 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 time and its history, because his own belief systems have essentially like flooded everything. That everyone just believes what Milo says, but he's actually wrong. And it's only until the final Frater that it's finally revealed that even he finally realizes that he's a simulation. Frater's a simulation. Nobody is real. It's part. They're in a matrix. They're in a simulation. They're not real. They're made by a guy outside the real world, with a computer. And so then the lightsaber fight was in his head. Real reality is, if you got into a sword fight with someone, they took off your hand multiple times. I think you would probably have enough blood left to survive that. How would you even survive that? It's because you wouldn't. It's a beatdown. You're not going to survive that. But probably what actually probably happened at the time that made him think that is probably because the Earth forces at the time in the military simulation probably were actually fighting him pretty good. So maybe he did get blown up a couple of times, and he just started blaming Frater for that whole thing. you know. So then what happens next is, you know, there's this time where there isn't, that Frater and his friends haven't been brought in yet by Milo, because Milo now believes, though, that after that event, that he took Frater and his friends and put them into like a phantom zone, like in Superman 2 with the phantom criminals, that they're just frozen in limbo somewhere. And it's like he feels like that was my revenge against them. Well, the real reality is they're saved in the coat. So there's a sense of truth to that, but he doesn't know that. He doesn't understand any of this yet. And he's about to just screw up Mr. Pennypacker's plans. And Mr. Pennypacker's never been a fan of Milo. Um, so then what happens next is, he has Billy, the debug program, who's accessing the quantum computer to go deep into its files, and he wants to bring back the big four uh, because he wants revenge. But during this time, he kind of allows the debug program to exist on the Earth because it gives it a sense of independence, or a false sense of independence. But the truth is, he can always access it when he wants to. Because for a while, he was also he was kind of getting lazy, and I think he had won some battles against the Earth forces, and so the Earth forces were not like trying to fight him anymore. They had too much. They had kind of lost. So as a result, that the Earth forces had kind of lost. So that was that was kind of it. But then what happened was, so Billy, he's independent on the Earth. I was about to say that Dark Milo told him to bring back the four. Not really, not really. But Billy, because of Milo's obsession, though, obviously Billy picked up on that, and then Billy's kind of like going, well, wait, what? Why is it? I always got these like four guys in their show in my head. So at some point, of course, Mr. Pennypacker had made for this character, even though he had never met for this Billy character to ever exist. He needed to create a strong NPC to he needed a strong NPC to basically keep the Billy debug character entertained, so that he didn't destroy his computer, because that's how powerful he could be if only Milo knew how to use him. And Milo was struggling to use him because he's a dumb redneck. It's really hard to tell him what to do. I mean, you could tell him to pull down any kind of program, and he as long as you know how to tell him, it's very hard to get the debug program to connect to the quantum computer. So So finally, Mr. Pennypacker creates Glenn Farfinger, a very nice, very funny, very good straight man type redneck character for Billy. And of course, Billy thinks this is either his father or older brother or whatever. It's never been truly established. Of course, in this kind of simulation, no one has parents. No one has parents. You're sort of created out of thin air, and your whole background and history is just clueless. So a lot of times characters just kind of make up their own backgrounds and origins because they just came out of thin air, you know. So Billy's fine, and but Glenn Farfinger has been given enough independent intelligence by Mr. Pennypacker. He's not truly free is like say Dark Milo, but he's pretty independent. But they start to really like this show, this Saturn Ground production show of called Frater versus Retro. They don't know. They just um very they just sort of hover to it. They're sort of like, well, why don't we start a video game show? And and of course, Dark Milo's out in space. He has no idea. He's full of hate for these guys for no reason, you know. But when it comes to his debug program, he hasn't had to really use him yet. He he feels that somehow he's also made enemies with Jim Sterling or something, and he feels that he is used, the way he explains the universe he's presently in, and even the Earth forces seem to follow this too, because they got it from Milo actually, and it's part of what I call is the Milo continuity. And what Milo strongly believes is that he used Billy to get him out of the normal real Earth dimension, which I got to explain that too. He doesn't believe like this present dimension that he's in, that this was his original dimension. He believes, of course, he comes from the same time as us, the real time. He comes from the same time as the rest of us. Actually, in the Frater's retro movie, it was revealed that he was Steve Gutenberg. Believes he believes he's Steve Gutenberg because why do you think that? Because the creator of Sangron Productions uh actually is a fan of Police Academy. So he likes Steve Gutenberg. So he has this thing in his head that he believes very strongly he's Steve Gutenberg. But of course, by the time of Final Freighter, and then of course that the later shows that's never brought up again. That was what I call a Milo continuity delusion. Everything about the Milo continuity is false, and it creates a lot of false continuity. The comic books have lots of false continuities, where later on they'll say, "Oh, that never happened," or characters were lied to. That's it's the way it is. Even some movies and TV shows sometimes will do a false continuity. So Dark Milo believes that he came from actually this real timeline. He came from what I call the real time, and he's from this dimension, this Earth, this everything, including Frater, including Mr. Peck and Mr. Graves and Pooh Guppy Adams. He was supposed to take over the Fraterverse retro from this dimension, but then he somehow, I don't know how he even explains it, he has a space army, which wouldn't be possible in this dimension. Wouldn't be possible. Uh, I mean, you even tried to create a military junta in this timeline. You would be, well, you see on CNN and Fox what happens to you know uh, little juntas if think they can. They get blown up by us. Um, so he apparently has a space army. Like he doesn't have the logic, people, to understand that that's not possible. But he has all these characters have essentially a false past because they they essentially aren't real. They're all computer simulations. Even Frater of this current Saturn Ground universe, which is going to debut later on tonight, is he's a simulation. His friends are a simulation. They're not real. But under the Milo continuity, they were led to believe that they're all pretty darn real, that they're real flesh and blood. So, then what ends up happening is that, and so what happens was under the Milo continuity is that he had used the debug program Billy, which wasn't called the debug program, which was called like the transdimensional merge, or I can't remember the name that was used at the time. He used the dimensional thing because he felt at the time in the real world, the real time, this dimension, that Jim Sterling at the time, it was before, it was like many years ago. This would have been back in like 2010, 2011. That Jim Sterling was after him. That Jim Sterling was about ready to go after Dark Milo, and he had to get out. He had to get out of this dimension, and he used the dimensional merge to go to what is presently this dimension, which is not a dimension. It's a computer matrix. It's a computer military simulation matrix. It consists of just pretty much like one galaxy at the time. So then, like Billy and Glenn are, they're just messing around. They want to create a video game show. At the time, of course, Mr. Pennypacker, the man who is in the real world, who owns Saturn Graph Productions, who has written all those books, who has done all these things, he has no problem with this because it just, if it means these characters, it just gives them something to do so they're not messing with his program. That's fine. So as a result, Dark Milo, this is why he hasn't messed with Billy in so long, because he 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 used him twice in his mind. He used him once to take Frater, Peter Graves, Mr. Peck, and finally Pugopi Adams into this sort of like phantom zone, you know. So he did that, which in reality he didn't. He didn't do any of that. That they were saved on code. That's what that so-called phantom zone was. So, and then of course, technically what it meant is they don't really exist. They were just saved as code. They're not like alive or anything like that. So, and then of course the second time around was to leave the real dimension that we're in for another dimension. That's his continuity, and that's his lie that he lives, which will soon be ending, um, thanks to his scientists. But basically, so to really discuss like what is this current computer matrix they're in, the Saturn Ground universe like. It is all designed by Mr. Pennypacker. It is a world where the only planet that has any kind of life on it is Earth. Obviously, it's based on the solar system. And but the problem is that, well, it has the solar system and it has Earth and all that. The problem is on Earth, there's only certain essential NPCs that have full intelligence. The rest of them, the rest of the population of Earth is actually just people talking backwards. They're not complete. They don't have complete AI. It's like it's like playing Baldur's Gate or Neverwinter Nights, and you run into an NPC that doesn't have much dialogue written for them. It's not there. It's not physically possible to fill this game with every single NPC to have a full dynamic, radiant conversation. It's not ChatGPT. I'm sure eventually with that, you could, but this is back in 2010, guys. So this is back in like 2017 or something like that. It's just not possible. So, in fact, the joke is that Mr. Pennypacker created all this on a module, a Neverwinter Nights module, which is really funny. But because he used to make modules for Neverwinter Nights. So then, finally, Billy and Glenn Farfinger have decided that they're going to create a video game show, and they call it the new Frater versus Retro. The idea is that they like the Frater versus Retro so much, and it hasn't been around in years. The last time it had created a show was in 2011, which is true. Which is true. And but they have decided to bring the show back. Well, Billy doesn't realize he has tapped into the quantum computer with this. So they're not just acquiring just a name. They're bringing back a name, yes, but they're bringing back more than just a name. They brought back first Mr. Peck has materialized into this military simulator. He has walked up and he has found the cabin and he's very angry about it. And so they get to meet Mr. Peck. So then all of a sudden, out of the blue, in the cellar is Pooh Guppy Adams. And but then and they get to meet Pooh Guppy, and Mr. Peck and Pooh Guppy are back together. But then in the cellar is also Frater. And of course, probably took Frater to wake up a little longer because he's a deep sleeper. He sleeps a long time. And the three are back together. Well, wait, what about Peter Graves? Well, Peter Graves, of course, go figure. Peter Graves ended up like being projected onto some satellite in space somewhere. And of course, at the time, what ended up actually happening was, as a result of this, this woke up Dark Milo and his entire army, and uh, Milo was like, "What is happening? My enemies are back and they're after me, and my revenge is more important than anything in the universe." And he doesn't actually understand that the real reality is these guys have no idea who he is. And then you'll notice that in the new Frater vs. Retro, they have no idea who he is. And Frater only is kind of like Frater, I think, is tricked into believing the Milo continuity because he really doesn't know because he's just a simulation himself. So, they start having shenanigans. They eventually find Peter Graves. you know but eventually it becomes a cat and mouse game with Milo and Frater. Eventually they hole up in a cabin and the big four hole up in a cabin, and eventually Milo and his armies secede to capture them. And of course that they got the big four, but then you know Billy and Glenn are stuck on the earth because obviously Milo's not interested in them. But he does understand the importance of Billy, but he doesn't really need Billy right now. That he feels that Billy's better just being by himself with Glenn on the earth, and that there really isn't a point to use him as a weapon. But apparently, Frater is on the Star Destroyer. He decides to do something very very destructive. He doesn't even realize how destructive it is because he feels that since the Frater versus new Freight, the new Frater versus Retro has been taken over by Dark Milo, that that Dark Milo is forcing them all to do the kind of show he wants. Frater has a new idea. He's going to let Billy and Glenn do the Frater versus Retro on the Earth, that way it will be independent of Dark Milo. But what happens is after about 2-3 shows, Frater doesn't like it. He doesn't like how Billy and Glenn do things because they're not really hosts. They're not really been trained to be good gamers. They're not trained at all of this. They're still very not meant for this. And so then but then Frater finds he's exploring up on the Star Destroyer this weapon. It's called the Clonator. It's a weapon that clones. It can create any kind of clone of any kind of person. And really, probably in reality, it's again something tied to the quantum computer. It's probably something left over from Billy or whatever strange. It's another strange kind of debug program, but not quite to the level of Billy. So he uses the clonator because you need to understand this. He's been trained to to believe the Milo continuity, which, understand this is almost 40 minutes now, so we're going to explain the Milo continuity one more time. The Milo continuity is that he he in our real world he was trained by Frater. He was trained by Frater with other students to take over the Frater versus Retro show because he felt that his friends were not good enough. They didn't have any video game knowledge that Milo and and those other students were going to have every kind of knowledge of video games, and they were going to be a powerful force in gaming news. So, but then Milo went insane. He killed the other students. Then Frater found out about it, went on a ship. Don't explain how in the real world there is a spaceship, a big spaceship out in space, or a normal human being would somehow, I don't know if he's taken on 500 jobs or something to afford a Star Destroyer, but apparently he does. And he's wearing a crash helmet suit, like he's wearing like a Darth Vader outfit, but it's all goofy. And the Dark Milo continuity then believes, of course, that he was beaten by Frater SH, beaten really badly. It's like Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi, just beating up Darth Vader at the end. It was like that. He believes that. Then the Milo continuity believes that he, to get revenge against the Four, he put them in limbo. He put them in a phantom zone. Then he made but to escape the real world dimension, to get away from Jim Sterling, he created a debug program named Billy. Then with Billy, he was able to escape to another dimension, and but the only problem is it's kind of like a mirror dimension where on Earth, instead of people talking normal like I'm talking right now, they're talking backwards. You know? So now they're talking all backwards. They're talking backwards, people. It's nuts. It's absolute bonkers. So and then of course um yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the Milo continuity. And then he then all of a sudden Billy and Glenn, bring back the original four that were in the code, and they start to believe the Milo continuity. That this is all about another dimension. This is all about a guy trying to get revenge, and so now the big four are all back together, but at the same time now they're stuck on Milo's ship. They, the, now Billy now Frater's using the clonator. He is going to clone a bunch of YouTubers that are some of his favorites. He clones Spoonie, but the problem is the first Spoonie he clones is one that is based off more of when Spoonie's in character is a real crazy guy with a big sword or something. So it goes really wrong. He clones Razor Fist, but the Razor Fist clone is nuts. He's ranting how Shirley Temple is metal, and Tiny Tim and Collective Soul is death metal, and it's what I mean, it's insanity. But then then he finally decides, well, no, we'll have a nurse Spoonie. I'll try to nail it a little better. And it does look like that. He creates a smart Spoonie one. So this is interesting. So, but this Spoonie, of course, is very calculating, very calculating. But then finally he does it. He knows what he needs to do. He needs to create Dark Milo's worst nightmare, and it's Jim Sterling. Because remember, the Milo continuity is he escaped this world to get away from Jim Sterling from possibly destroying him, which isn't true because he's a computer simulation. He's never been in the real world. So So don't worry, we're not going to recap. That's enough recapping. So then, so now you have four clones. And they're chasing Billy and Glenn all over the place. with Frater and then they're still on Milo's ship. They're dealing with all the shenanigans up there, but once Sergeant, of course, comes to the understanding of what these guys have done, they're having an emergency because they got a clone of Jim Sterling, and also on the Earth, Jim Sterling and the Smart Spoonie, they have created a nuclear a nuclear factory where they're producing clones by the second. They're producing clones by the minute, second, whatever. Lots of clones. It's like a Dalek story. And so basically, they're creating a clone war. And once Dark Milo, of course, learns of it, he goes crazy. And you're gonna have millions of Jim Sterlings. You know, and of course, now it's a race against time. It creates a clone war, clone Saturn Grodd clone war, and really, in truth, it's a clone war in this like military dimension. Of course, you can imagine Mr. Pennypacker, who's the inventor of all this, he's going nuts. That they've done this, and pretty soon this is why the Mr. Pennypacker character is made, because the creator of all this, the actual owner of Saturngrad, and all those books and all that, he's had it. He's going to get in his own program and try to stop all these guys, but not now. So the Clone War is happening, and eventually, what ends up happening is that they use Billy. Of course, Billy's the only answer to end all this, to stop the clones. They stop the clones once and for all by having them say they'd never existed and whatever. And so they'd stop, but at the same time, it's created enough damage that Dark Milo's army is almost virtually crushed and defeated, which allows the Four to actually defeat him, because he's going to get into one last lightsaber fight. This time in this computer matrix is the first lightsaber fight between Milo and Frater H. It's the first one. And as a result, yeah, it's very sloppy. It's very sloppy because even Frater's been led to believe, by the Milo continuity, that he is this great lightsaber Jedi or whatever. The real Frater H is not a sword fighter. Okay. And so, he might play video games where he's done that, but that doesn't mean he's, a real lightsaber, you know, Jedi or whatever. So finally, so what happens is that Milo's defeated in the saber battle. He's destroyed. Real truth is his uh, AI form is destroyed, but he's still saved to the code. All the characters are saved to the code. These characters can't be actually fully destroyed unless they're deleted by Mr. Pennypacker. But in all this, before this event actually happens, back to Milo's ship, I'm about to explain. You would ask, well, then how did all these characters figure out this is a simulation? That it's a matrix. How did they figure that out? Well, Dark Milo reveals, and this is jumping kind of to the final freighter. I will jump to some of the events of that, in this abridged version, to get you all caught up before the new show begins on Matryoshka. So what happens is, um, what happens is, um, they're on the ship, they're on the Star Destroyer, and what happens is Milo's scientists have revealed some startling truths about their universe, and that is that that it can't be possibly real because you have people talking backwards. You have also they're detailing glitches, actual computer glitches that would not be possible in real life. That real life is dense, it doesn't, you don't have trees suddenly popping in and out of existence. And they were taking note of this stuff the entire time, and they finally revealed it to Dark Milo. So Dark Milo, that was it. He that was actually the destruction of the Milo continuity. Is that basically, but this of course is around the time of the trials and stuff. So the, the, there was a trial between where with Dark Milo and Frater and his friends, where after the Clone War, he wanted to try them for the Clone War because Frater did start that war, and it did cripple the Empire. So, so, but during that time, he came to this massive, massive scientific discovery that he's not real, Frater's not real, none of them are real, and I mean, and he tells Frater this, and of course it destroys Frater to find out, yeah, you're not real. You're not real. You're not based off. You're just based off somebody. You're not real. Your friends aren't real. So as a result, this kind of mentally destroys Frater. Um, Frater is able to kind of keep it, but before that happens, of course, he keeps it together. You know, long enough to uh, long enough to help defeat Milo and hopefully Frater's idea is to basically allow his friends to live a long happy life. To live a long happy life. To not have, you know, all this, to have to deal with the burdens of all this. That you know look, just go out and just do whatever your dreams are, that even though this is a glitchy fake Earth, at least it's kind of like a glitchy. It's like a very realistic kind of Earth. So just kind of like Mr. Peck wanted to be a crab fisherman, so he became a crab fisherman. That Billy and Glenn just want to be back in their cabin and just enjoy hosting the Frater versus Retro, and that was it. And you know, Graves wanted to go back to making episodes of Biography in Crackton, Ohio, and he did. And Pook Uppy Adams, he went on to create a fire alarm company, which is absolutely hilarious, but he did. And so everyone seemed to be happy, and Frater, unfortunately, it was the sad one at the end of the Frater versus Retro movie, even though it's not revealed during the movie, these facts is that Frater was going to go away. He was going to go away and become a hermit and be on an island called E2, very similar to the island on Last Jedi. That it was to be where he would, he could attend Catholic masses, traditional Latin Catholic masses, and he could still do his paranormal shows, and and he could do all those things. So Frater has all this knowledge of the truth, which is that that this is not real. This is not real at all. And so he goes off, and he's on his island, and everybody else, it looks all nice and good, right? I mean, he could be sad, he has now the knowledge, he knows the facts, and the knowledge and the facts are his friends aren't real, he's not real, and he isn't going to continue the charade anymore. He's not going to continue the charade. He's just going to be, he's going to exist forever as a Catholic monk who's just, he's going to be in his zone, and he'll be in a nice, beautiful island, nice oceaned island, and but that's but the reality is it doesn't work out that way. Now Dark Milo's gone. He's saved the code. He's not in this world, but the problem is Mr. Peck. Mr. Peck, this is what happens. Mr. Peck is doing the crab fisherman thing, but he realizes it pretty quick. Everybody on his boat talks backwards and they just smile. They don't seem to have any kind of intelligence at all. Even when he goes to the bars and stuff, and once so he quits the boat. He leaves the boat because he's mad. He's like, these people aren't real people. We need to get out of this dimension. We need to go back to our world, our real world. And so around this time, so Mr. Peck is he's making his way back. His first goal is to go back to Billy and Glenn because that's where this all began. And so he finds Billy and Glenn. He tells them, I I don't belong in this world, and we're in an unstable dimension. He doesn't know, of course, it's a computer matrix, and he needs to find Peter Graves, Poe Guppy, and finally Frater. They don't even know where Frater is, and so they go back to Crackton, Ohio. Of course, Crackton, Ohio was destroyed by TIE fighters in the last movie, in the first movie. So then, of course, they find Peter Graves, and of course, Peter Graves joins them, and then of course they find Pook Uppy Adams and his fire alarm company, and all comedy ensues. But he joins them too. But they need to find Frater, and they need to ask. They need Frater's help so that they can start the process of trying to get off that world and leave that dimension to go back. So what is happening at this time is Mr. Pennypacker comes into being existence because he sees Mr. Peck, he sees Mr. Graves, and he sees Poogopy Adams as becoming like viruses where they are attacking his system because they're trying to essentially destroy it, to somehow escape it somehow in some weird way. And actually at the time he's trying to remedy it by creating an expansion to the computer matrix, which is what we call as the 2011 dimension. There's also some pocket dimensions around that he was making that he didn't quite flesh out, but the 2011 dimension, which is essentially what the current day Frater versus Retro on Metrotechnica is based in, that pocket universe. That it is, only Mr. Pennypacker at that time has connections with that. So then, but he's about, Mr. Pennypacker's about ready to enter the picture because he's going to either attempt to send these guys there or just plain out delete them all because he's getting sick of this. So, so basically, um, they finally find Frater, and of course Frater wants nothing to do with them because Frater just wants these guys to enjoy their life. He doesn't want them to have this knowledge that he has. This is horrible. A horrible idea that you would not even exist, that you don't even exist, that you're just made out of thin air, and there's no real, no real process to it, you know. So, of course, eventually what happens is, the you know because they have Billy with him, which is a debug program to the quantum computer, they're able to bring back Dark Milo and Sarda, which is a terrible idea. But they do it because they feel like that only Milo now would have that knowledge. Well, Milo does have knowledge. He knows about the fact that they're all a computer simulation. This is disastrous for Frater because all this is his friends are going to now know this, and it drives them insane, and then they go after Frater and all that. And of course, what happens is Frater during this time, Billy and Glenn, they want to be hosts of the Frater versus Retro show. Well, you know, remember what I said? The Milo continuity believes that Milo has always been the successor to the new Frater versus Retro, that he was to be the host. You know, so the Milo continuity is still kind of going in a way at this time. It's supposed to be kind of dead, but it's still kind of going in a way. So yeah, so Milo demands that he be made host. That and of course Frater. Of course, you remember what I said. Frater's destroyed. He doesn't even mentally care. So he's given up on everything. So he gives Milo the show because he don't care anymore. Like just like that. So Milo didn't even have to have a lightsaber fight with him. He gave up right away, and Milo's so happy he can do reseller of the week, and he can do Fortnite streams. So at that time, everything's good, but Billy and Glenn want their show back, and so they challenge. Frater tells them to go challenge Milo and Sergeant for the show. Well, uh, Billy and Glenn lose. They lose, of course, because Milo's a better player in that. So then they go back to Frater. They said, "Well, we lost. How can you train us? Can you help us?" And of course, Frater Frater says no, and they camp. They actually end up camping out outside the monastery, and then they ask again, but this time Billy says, "Please, please train us." And then Frater, of course, because they said please, Frater then lets them in, and he starts to train them. He has them play Contra and Street Fighter 2, Doom, and the real stuff. The really train them to become really good players. And so then you know um and then of course they actually do challenge Dark Milo again, and they beat him, and they now have ownership of the new Freighters Retro. Only problem is the only problem is this drives Milo insane, and so he wants to destroy the Earth, and he wants to destroy everything in that military simulation. So now Mr. Pennypacker comes to the picture right away because he now sees that he's got his computer's about ready to get blown to pieces. So he has to start, he sees all these characters as being a virus. So he puts them all he wants to put them all on a chopping block. So then, and then of course at the end of the final freighter, which is that, that Mr. Peck flies a ship right into Dark Milo's ship, which basically destroys Dark Milo and Sergeant. And but Dark Milo's just a head on a shelf now. He's just a head. He's been blown up pretty good, but Mr. Pennypacker is able to kind of like bring back bring him back in a way. But he in the but he's pretty weak and limited for a long time, for at least a year. So then of course, you know, you know, Peter Graves, he gets eaten by a snuggle wumpapuss, and it's just Pooguppy. Adams Pooguppy talks Frater that they should go to this location that Graves and Peck were going to go to the new dimension, which is the new dimension is the 2011 zone, which is just an expansion in the computer simulation because they don't know that it's not possible to leave the simulation. But Mr. Pennypacker was expecting this, that he was going to create a dimension for them. The real reality at the end of the final freighter is, which is confusing because Poguppy and Freighter bounce off a mirror and crash into lava. Apparently, in the mirror, you're supposed to see that which is in the mirror is supposed to be the new show, the what is called the original Freighter versus Retro, which took over, after the final freighter. the the strange reality is that the characters from that military simulator matrix effectively were killed and will never come back, but there are now, because they hit that expansion, uh, that um that 2011 expansion, that 2011, that mirror to the 2011, they effectively create copies of themselves. So they're not the same. They're a copy of a copy in a way. It's kind of weird, I was trying to explain it. I always used to say if stuff had happened to myself that I could say that, well, to me the the final piece of the Sattergrad universe to me is the final Frater, because it was meant to be the movie to kind of finish off the legacy characters. Well, so basically now we're finally moving on. We're finally into the modern day. So the original Frater versus Retro, and then there is the show. Then there was the original Frater versus Retro, and there's the new Frater versus Retro. The new Frater versus Retro changes names, as it has to. That would be just goofy. It would be confusing. Wait, you have an original Frater versus Retro and a new Frater versus Retro. Explain. New Frater versus Retro changes to Farfinger Gaming, and it's still over there to this day, and over at the Saturn Garage Productions channel. So Farfinger Gaming continues to this day, and it is that. And it has Glenn Farfinger and Billy, but I will explain what happens. Ugh. The original Frater versus Retro is Frater and his friends. So they're stuck in 2011. But remember what I said. Mr. Peck is dead. Peter Graves is dead. But Mr. Graves is dead, I should say. They're dead. Pugapi Adams and Frater are they they they're alive and kicking, but they're a copy of a they're a copy. Okay, so but they have all the memories. Mr. Pennypacker is fully controlling this dimension, though. He can fully patch it. He can fully control it, and the point is, it's a complete replica 2011, maybe with some glitches and stuff, but it is the year 2011. So, there's game releases that come out at the time. Like if it's February, you can't play Skyrim. Skyrim comes out at the end of the year. So, but so you would ask, well, it's Pooh and Frater. What about Mr. Peck? What about Mr. Graves? Mr. Peck was deleted, you said, and so was Graves, right? Well, Mr. Peck is actually is actually Mr. Pennypacker. Mr. Pennypacker is impersonating Mr. Peck in order to control things right from the ground, right? To control Frater and control Pooh Guppy Adams by making them believe that he has been their long lost friend. Well, the only problem is the Pennypacker character has a tendency to be a heel. So he's always trying to usurp control, and he's a heel, and so as a result, the Mr. Peck character in that dimension is fairly villainous and fairly nasty, and is trying to always constantly take control. So as a result, Mr. Pennypacker ends up is basically Frater and Pooh start to wake up. He starts to create AI characters to try to kind of help him to you know gain control over these guys, like Don Matrick, because he saw how Frater, how that drove Frater nuts watching that E3 with the Connect stuff with Don Matrick. And so he was like, oh, I need to make this Don Matrick character. And you kind of notice over here at Matrica, there's a guy called Doc Manning, and he looks a lot like Don Matrick. Geez, I wonder if that's the same character. Oh, by the way, the Saturn Metrotretica is a part of the Saturn Ground universe, but it was created by Don Matrick, and he created it, so that someday maybe he could usurp control from Mr. Pennypacker and take over the entire computer matrix, but not today. So so basically, then what happened was with the original Freighter is that um, to take things up to the modern day, what happened was is that um, eventually Mr. Peck was exposed that he was, he was Mr. Pennypacker. He was being the Black Scorpion, and he was doing terrible, terrible things, and he's exposed, but is being is also I didn't explain Mr. Graves. Mr. Pennypacker found some leftover code of Mr. Graves, but Mr. Graves was, um, his AI was damaged, and you'll see that in those old episodes. And so, as a result, um, they have troubles with Graves the entire season. So basically, at the end of the season, Mr. Pennypacker deletes the damaged Mr. Graves. He deletes it. With Pooh Guppy Adams, he saves him to the code, and with Frater, he sends them to a pocket dimension called the Paradise Dimension. What is that? And what that is the pocket dimension. This pocket dimension called the Paradise Dimension is a 80s mall. It's an 80s amusement park. It's an 80s land. It's all on an island in the coin game. And and basically, for most of it, Frater's trying to figure out why, Frater has a limited memory. Also, another thing has happened at this time. Mr. Pennypacker has split Frater SH. Frater doesn't know this. That he's been split into two different Frater SHs to weaken him. One is a bad Frater SH and one is a good Frater SH. The good Frater SH has all the wisdom and spirituality, um, but none of the military cunning, none of the self defensiveness, um, and even some of the stubbornness. These are all essential. Some of our negative feats are actually positives in some cases when you have the right amount of spirituality and wisdom and and childlikeness, being like a child. Jesus talks about how to enter heaven you must be like a child. Well, that's true. And, if you were just a cold adult, with a military mind, and you didn't have any kind of love for anybody, I mean, you're worthless. You're evil. And that's the way the bad Frater is. He's all those things. He has no child like this. He has no wisdom. He has no love. He has no care. He's just a jerk 24/7. And so, of course, the bad Frater doesn't really make an appearance until a lot later. That really in the original Frater, in was I like to call the second season of the original Frater versus Retro, is that Frater is just sort of in his own little paradise realm as the good Frater, but then eventually what happens is the events of Farfinger Gaming finally happen. And what happens is Billy and Glenn, they, basically what happens is you need to remember in the end, Billy is still the debug computer. He's still a debug computer, a debug program, I should say. And what happens is Dark Milo starts to manipulate him. He's just a lackey for Mr. Pennypacker. But as a result, he's able to manipulate Billy to become more and more connected to the quantum computer. That Billy is getting more highly intelligent all of a sudden. This actually started in the final Frater, this process, because what was happening is the debug program was actually finally really, really, really connecting with that computer. The pauses between him not being connected. When he's not connected, he's only got 10 IQ. He's really dumb. But when he's connected, it's like 200 IQ. It's like super smart. He's like able to quote Aristotle. You know. But this is happening more and more by Farfinger Gaming, and Milo is taking advantage of it because Milo originally made him, and so he's basically and technically truly Billy's father. So Billy is becoming a new character and getting very educated very quickly. He's becoming a character called Sir William Esquire. So he's becoming Sir William Esquire. He's becoming a super intelligent computer, and he's turning into a British aristocrat instead of a redneck. And he's become 100% connected to the quantum computer. This has given Dark Milo control of that computer. He has world access to the computer. And eventually, what happens is Sir William Esquire makes Dark Milo a new body. So this is really some big stuff. And so then the next thing that ends up happening is is that basically Dark Milo and Sir William Esquire take over world access of the computer matrix, and but at the time, uh, William Esquire is having problems because he's still kind of like loves Glenn Farfinger and still remembers, and it's hard for him to truly pull away. So then, uh, what happens is Dark Milo decides to blow up the world where people talk backwards. This is huge. His idea is to destroy Glenn Farfinger, so then Billy has nothing to ever go back to. He only has his father. So as a result, um, that um, eh, they end up doing this, but then Glenn Farfinger and his new friend um, Curly Joe, they survive. So then eventually, Curly Joe and Glenn Farfinger, they're on the island, that of E2 that Frater had founded. And in that monastery, there's actually an essential NPC that had been made a long time ago. His name is the Abbot, and he looks just like Patrick Troughton from Doctor Who, the second Doctor. Eh, Sounds exactly like him, has the same picture, everything. And basically, this Abbott ends up helping these guys out, and during this time, where basically Milo and Sir William Esquire are totally, causing havoc. They create a new enemy AI named Kojak, to basically try to try to wage some war against them, with a bunch of crazy Puguppies and stuff. And basically, what ends up happening is there's a final war at the end of that season where basically, Kojak gets killed, and of course, as a result, Kojak is going to hate Saturn Ground Productions and want to do nothing but help Abbott in his battles against Mr. Pennypacker. So now we're finally catching up to this. So, and basically what it is now finally we can nearly end this, that basically, so where was the original Frater versus Retro before it jumped over to this. Well, basically, the original Frater versus Retro, the Pugapi Adams. This is what happens. Basically, Pugapi Adams, Billy. See what I jumped ahead of myself. So what happens is at the end, the quantum computer gets blown up by Abbott, by Bad Frater, and Mr. Pennypacker. They they had to basically destroy the quantum computer in order to stop Billy or Sir William Esquire and Dark Milo. Bad Frater destroys. Bad Frater come finally makes his appearance, and he just destroys Dark Milo, like like insanely destroys him. So so then finally, of course, they end up overloading the quantum computer. The quantum computer blows up. So then, as a result, you would think that the whole universe is over, right? The Matrix is over. The Saturn Rod universe is over. No, Mr. Pennypacker reloads the whole thing onto like a laptop, and he's able to kind of, basically recover everything. But as a result, a lot of deleted characters were found on a floppy, and as a result, have been brought back to life. Actually, in reality, almost all of them have the potential to return. So Mr. Peck is back. It is the original Mr. Peck, from the beginnings of New Frater versus Retro. So he's back. He's on original Frater versus Retro. There is no Peter Graves. Graves is, though he's back in the code, he's no longer deleted. He could be brought back by Mr. Pennypacker. Mr. Pennypacker wanted. So, but so you would ask, well, then wait, Billy's in the original Frater vs. Retro. Why? Or now he's in the Metatretica version now. He's but so what's his story? I thought he was destroyed. Well, this is what happened after he got destroyed. Billy is just a debug without the quantum computer. Billy is just like 10 IQ all the time. He's really dumb. And he has no connection to the Mr. Pennypacker's current computer at all. He can't connect with it. So he's literally been rendered harmless. So what Mr. Pennypacker has done to his avatar is he's sent Billy's avatar to the 2011 zone with Frater, with the good Frater, I should say. The bad Frater stays in on Farfinger Gaming and the Saturn Ground Productions zone, which is of the computer matrix. This 2011 zone will explain what happened. Well, after the destruction of the quantum computer, Mr. Pennypacker lost all his entire access to the 2011 zone, pretty much, except for sending people there. He can send people there, but he can't make people come back. He can't log into it. He's lost that kind of access to it. So it's not getting patched. It's unstable. It's just crazy. So, so basically, so Good Freighter was sent. Billy was sent. Mr. Peck was sent. Pookuppy Adams he brought back from the code, and so he sent Pookuppy Adams there. Basically, all three are almost Pookuppy Adams, Billy, and Frater. Uh, yeah, are like neighborhood kids. They're just childish, and they drive Mr. Peck nuts. Like they do constant pranks on Mr. Peck. So, but what happened was with Frater is like super childish now. super childish. As a result, he gets a phone call from Doc Matty, and Doc Matty wants to sign him to Vetritrica, and of course he promises Frater you can play video games. Uh, you say that to any kid, hey, I'll sign for a contract, hey, but the good news is you get to play video games. The kid's like, heck, I'll sign it. And of course, Mr. Peck, of course, makes fun of him, saying, well, you can already do that, Sagamore Productions. But he says, you don't understand. We can play video games. like it's like you can't win, you know. So so basically, um, so basically, they end up over at Metrotrecica, and that's where we're at right now, and over at Farfinger, they continue to do the sort of the Doctor Who stories, and you know presently it's Abbott and Kojak, and they also have um, Curly Joe, but that and they're battling against Mr. Pennypacker and bad bad Frater SH. And the current Frater versus Retro. It's called Frater versus Retro over here at Metrotrecica. It's not called Original Frater versus Retro because there's only one Frater versus Retro as far as Metrotrecica is concerned. So that it'll be every Friday, maybe once in a while there'll be a special occasion, and I'll see you all there.